Hello everyone, welcome to the Christ MotoGP podcast. And if you're listening for the second time today, or the first time today, we have some important news for you. So, I was editing the podcast, everything was all okay, testing, nothing's really happening. And then social media starts to explode. Marc Marquez, according to Autosport and then Sky Sports Italy, will join the factory Ducati team in 2025. And then, Pete... It just happened maybe half an hour ago. We get Jorge Martin officially confirmed for Aprilia for 2025 on a multi-year deal. It's pretty incredible, isn't it? What happens on a Monday in MotoGP?
It is, isn't it, John? Yeah, just as the test was finishing, literally as the testing was finishing on track, this announcement came out. Just a quick video on social media. It's now been followed up by a short press release, which in turn shows just how last minute this whole thing is. You know, that there was everything normally would come out all nicely pre-prepared in one go with studio images and all that kind of thing. But there obviously wasn't time for that. So it shows how quickly things have moved this weekend. And as you say, this the report came out earlier that they'd done Ducati had done a bit of a U-turn. It looked like Martin had the ride. Then Marquez's reaction to potentially going to Pramac, his negative reaction to that being that it's not an option for me. It seems that Ducati were then perhaps worried that they're going to lose Marquez completely, and so now we've got this 180-degree U-turn, and it seems that Marc has got the ride. Now we've heard nothing from Ducati, so we don't know if Martin has just taken the decision now, has just said, well, I'm not waiting anymore, and he's done this deal with Aprilia, or if the deal with Marc is actually done, not announced yet, as we say, or whether, but maybe Martin's been told it's all done, it's over, and so that's why he's done this deal. We don't know which way round that is yet. Things are moving fast. Who knows? By the time this podcast comes out, maybe we will have had an announcement from Ducati. But we can safely say that, Marc Marquez will be a factory Ducati rider surely now that Martin, the guy that he was up against, has signed for Aprilia. So yeah, big boost for Aprilia, obviously, for their project. They're talking about it's this next step, replaces his good friend Aleix Espargaro. They're both managed by the same person, so that would have helped with the speed of the deal, obviously there. And a thank you to the Piaggio boss, wasn't there as well, Jordan? We were just saying in the announcement, which and they reference we spoke last night, and without wasting any time, we made the decision. So that's from Massimo Rivola, that quote. So he spoke to the Piaggio boss, who presumably has opened the checkbook and got Martin. They obviously knew that this is a great chance for Aprilia, a once in who knows how long chance to get the title leader.
Exactly.
And they've made it happen. So, big breaking news. And, let's see what, as we say, this is now, as we were talking only a few hours ago, we were waiting for the first domino, weren't we? The domino has now fallen. Let's see where the others go.
Yeah, it's really hard for me to process, Pete. Like, when you say all that, like, a few hours ago, like you say, we were just talking about, Marquez might go here, he might go there. Martin seems to be nailed on for it. But it's just like you say, either Martin has not, he just had enough, and he's like, I can't be bothered with the waiting game, and he's went and signed, or he knows that Marquez has signed, and we're just waiting for official confirmation. But what does this do now, Pete, thinking about this season? Because he's the World Championship leader, he's leaving Ducati, he's on the latest spec bike. Does this change the dynamic now for Ducati not giving him support? Does that do anything for the relationship with Marquez? Because now he's probably going to be pressing Ducati saying, I want upgrades on this 23 to make it the later spec and stuff. Who knows what's going to happen? It's really complex, isn't it?
That's it. All of those questions now come into the mix, don't they? Where Jorge Martin, if he has a bad weekend or he's struggling, people are going to say, well, is he getting all the help that maybe he should be getting? Given that if he wins, he'll be taking the number one plate with him to a rival Italian factory. Let's not forget that. It's not just another factory, it's another Italian factory. And as you say, at the same time, you've got Marc Marquez saying, well, come on, guys, support me, help me out a bit here. I'm on the year-old bike. Didn't sound like he was going to have too many things to test here today in a Mugello test. And I'm going to be your factory rider next year. So if Pecco wins, if I win, it stays within Ducati, the World Championship. So all of those sort of things, it's going to be a really tough balancing act for Ducati to kind of, make sure that everybody is treated as well as they can be in this situation. But Yeah, I mean, we thought that that we knew there was a risk of losing somebody.
Yeah,
Ideally, the situation, Bastianini, we thought, didn't we? And we should
would be the
mention
guy.
him,
Yeah,
that he would be the guy going. But it looks like maybe two of those guys are going. So it'll be Bastianini going and Jorge Martin. So yeah, big shake up at Ducati. And what does that mean for Pramac as well? Does the fact that if they got Marc, might that have helped to renew the deal with Ducati and everything else? Now Marc seems he's not going to go there. He's going to go straight to the factory team. So will that sort of persuade Pramac that what, maybe our future is better off with Yamaha?
exactly. And there's so many different aspects to the deal because the report from Autosport essentially said that Marquez is the key to this because his comments about I don't want to join Pramac really surprised the bosses, and he kind of forced it upon them, didn't he, to be like, "Are you going to take me or not?" And it seems to me, from what is said, that is it. Marc Marquez has used his clout. Like that word's the real thing, isn't it? They said you pick me or you pick Jorge Martin, and Ducati have went, hang on, we don't want to lose Marc Marquez. At the end of the day, he has won 6 MotoGP World Championships. Yes, Jorge Martin is leading the World Championship, but he hasn't got a MotoGP World title, and the opportunity may never come up again for Ducati. And this is the point where Aprilia have kind of went, well, we'll just sit and rub our hands and we'll grab one of them. And I think for Aprilia, the move makes sense because, like you said, the relationship that him and Aleix Espargaro have, uh, it seems like it's just a fit, isn't it? That they will just kind of replace him, and it's kind of made for Martin. It might not be the seat that he's always wanted, but he's going to be a factory rider, and he'll be the number one, won't he, Pete?
Exactly, John. I think that's the important thing. Not only will he be a factory rider, but potentially he can build that team around him, can't he? I mean, Maverick, we assume, will renew, although he's made clear that he doesn't know what he's
He
doing
doesn't
next
know,
year
yeah.
yet. But there's certainly, you'd say, a better chance of Martin getting that team behind him than if he goes into Pecco's team, which is very
Yeah,
much Pecco's team. I mean, he might have 3 world championships in a row by the end of this year if he can overturn that advantage. So yeah, I think as an environment, he has the chance to change things, shape things, but on the other hand, there's always a risk in changing bikes, isn't there? You never quite know how it's going to work out. But on paper, yeah, it's a great move for Aprilia to come out of this, and yeah, the whole Marc Marquez thing, and we mentioned a few hours ago, didn't we, that it was a case of who's going to blink first. That there was this kind of, Ducati on the one hand saying, well, this is the situation. Pramac has a factory bike. You can't have one at Gresini, etc., etc. But Marc holding firm and saying, well, I'm not going to Pramac. Well, it looks like Ducati blinked, didn't they? And yeah, we thought that a factory bike would be enough to keep Marc, but maybe Marc was going all out and said, look, factory team seat or nothing. Maybe he was being a lot harder in what he wanted than perhaps we thought publicly. We thought that staying at Gresini with the factory bike would be the
fair
perfect
enough.
combination for him. But yeah, I mean, presumably it wasn't, because otherwise that would have been the way to keep everybody happy and to keep everybody, meaning Marc and Jorge Martin anyway, on board. It hasn't happened, so there we are. And it shows Marc's ambition, doesn't it? Because if you're going into a factory team, you're going to fight for the World Championship. So that's making clear that he's looking at next season as a title fighting year,
Yeah,
and that's what he's there. That's what he's going for, So it'll be right back at the position, if you like, he was in at Repsol Honda, simply meaning you're at the front of the factory, you're in the official team, you're leading the development alongside Pecco, obviously, and that'll be an interesting dynamic in the pits there, won't it?
yeah, definitely. It's do you know what? It's so it fits though. It's a strange thing for me. I always could see it now, almost with Marc and Pecco. They kind of have been. I've noticed over the weekend and stuff that always coming up and shaking each other's hands, just talking to each other briefly. Martin was just a bit colder with it all. I don't know if he knew then that he was like, "Well, I know where I'm going," because this video, Pete, that Aprilia have put out, it looks like it was done today, like in the paddock, because they haven't really had anything to do all day. They haven't been testing, and it kind of seems that, like you say, last night the discussions took place, and Martin was like, "Yep, the big boss is here. The check is out. That is what I want. Ducati are messing me about. I'm going to do it now." And it seems like you say that Marquez has just went all in on it essentially, and he knows this is what I want, and Ducati have went, do you know what? Yeah, you're right. Sorry, Jorge, and it's a crazy 24 hours that we've had in MotoGP because, like you said, from Thursday, it seemed like it was going to be Martin from the reports. And how does that change? I don't know, Pete. You know better. You've been in the paddock for
Well,
longer than anyone.
I, but as you're saying, I mean, for me, the surprise is that Ducati thought that Marc would sort of just happily accept the Pramac move. You know, the fact that they seemed to be, from the comments that came out, wasn't it, that they weren't expecting this kind of reaction from Marc. That was a surprise for me, and it's you know that they didn't have a better gauge on what Marc wanted, if you like, or how
Yeah.
serious he was about where he wanted to go next year, and that they apparently thought that he would sort of just take the Pramac deal with open arms, if you like, and
No.
instead he flatly rejects it. And as you say, that seems to have changed everything. It seems that Jorge Martin, we were saying on Thursday, was looking relaxed, happy, like somebody that had been told some pretty good news, wasn't he? And then as the weekend went on, and it seems like everything went quiet about the whole contract situation for next year, he started to sort of get wind that, hang on, maybe there's a change of heart here. And I think he said after the race that the uncertainty was affecting his results and his riding, and he wanted to get his future
Yeah.
sorted out and everything else. Well, that was very different from the Jorge Martin in the pre-event press conference, wasn't it? So yeah, it just seems that things have changed rapidly. Obviously, Italian home race, all the bosses would have been there from Ducati, from Aprilia. Everybody, all the decision makers would have been close to hand, if you like, and that would help in making these kind of quick decisions or quick turnarounds. But yeah, remarkable, really, that it's happened in this way. But there we go. As we say, the dominoes have started to fall now, and everything else. The scramble begins for everyone that was waiting on this decision. Now, it's like firing the starting gun, isn't it? Now
Yeah.
the race begins for everyone else to grab the seats, because their value will be dropping as soon as the seats get crossed off and your options diminish. Your value drops as well.
Exactly. It's incredible. So it is that this has actually happened, and I suppose now that we have a 3 week break, there's plenty of time now for these teams to get PR, everything out there, so they know when the questions get asked at the next Grand Prix, this is what's going to happen. I will imagine that Marc Marquez will be announced as a factory Ducati rider within the next few days. If not, maybe Ducati aren't really. Maybe they're relaxed about it, like they've came across that way. Davide Tardozzi said to Sky Sports Italia today that before Assen will know who'll be the teammate to Pecco, and he said it in a real calm demeanor. I was like, this is too relaxed for me. Something they know something here, and then obviously Martin signs for Aprilia. Marquez is very quiet, nothing there. They're just very relaxed still. But yeah, you can bet that he will be announced as a factory rider at Ducati, which is just insane. If you had told someone at the start of 2023 all this would have happened, I don't want to. I don't know what's going to happen next. MotoGP has just changed so much in the 18 months, and it leaves the question as well: what happens to Enea Bastianini? Does he go now to a KTM, for example? There's reports that I have seen that Gas are apparently that'll be his destination. Going in where Pedro Acosta is. It's a good seat there, so it is. But how does it change that aspect? For other riders, like you mentioned, everyone now will start reacting.
We know, don't we? Once you leave a factory team, you're basically never coming back. Not with the same factory. So I think
True.
if you're Bastianini and you're thinking about the future, I think although on paper you might say, well, look, the best chance of being competitive is to stay with Ducati, go to Pramac, ride a factory spec bike. Probably that's your best chance of results next year. But in terms of your long-term career, and if you want to be a factory rider again, you've got to move, haven't you? You've got to start again at another factory. And we saw Miguel Oliveira face that kind of decision when he
Yeah.
got replaced by Jack Miller. He could have gone to Gas. Instead, he went over to Aprilia. And maybe, yeah, Bastianini, it would make sense for him to take that option at Tech 1 if it is available to him. And we were only speaking earlier, weren't we? I mean, effectively, you're getting on Pedro Acosta's bike. It's not a bad seat to be on, is it, over
Definitely
there
not.
at Tech 2? So yeah, I'm sure he's considering that. And as I say, it's got that added incentive that if he did really perform well on it, he could then step up to the factory team in the next round of contract negotiations 2 years later.
Exactly, and looking at KTM setup, Pete, I think you would agree they value, I think, the four bikes as just being the same. Really, they're not going to have a year-old spec. Yes, Augusto Fernandez maybe isn't riding the same spec that a Pedro Acosta is riding, but you can guarantee he's getting a lot of support as well. And you would think that Bagnaia would look at that going, there's only four factory bikes at KTM, being a part of that pool of riders. That project's on the up. Like you say, Pedro Acosta's leading it. It's a great spot to be in. So yeah, nothing on that side. Linnea hasn't said anything. Ducati haven't said anything. It's just Aprilia that have dropped this, really.
I think it's just too soon, isn't it? I think everyone now is reacting. I don't think anyone knew this announcement from Aprilia was coming out. There were some rumours that after the story about Marc that Aprilia was going to be where Martin would be going, but I think there's been rumours all year, hasn't there? There's a big difference between rumours and actually issuing an official announcement. And to be fair to Aprilia, their PR, their marketing, it's been pretty. They've been on the ball this year, and I think they knew you can't keep this kind of thing secret, and so they've just put it out there, and almost as soon as while the ink is almost before it's dry. It's gone out there in public. So credit to them for doing that. They've moved first, haven't they? And now everyone else is going to be moving as a result.
Yeah, I think that's everything we can cover, Pete. That's all we know. And yeah, what a bombshell on a Monday at a wet Mugello test. Who would have thought it, that MotoGP would have changed for the next few years, and we're going to see Jorge Martin, like you say, potentially with a number one plate on an Aprilia next year, which would just rub Ducati's nose in it, really, wouldn't it? So yeah, and Marc Marquez just officially needs to be announced now, assuming as a factory Ducati rider, as Pecco Bagnaia's teammate. Yeah, we're going to have plenty to talk about in the next few weeks now. I was thinking we could talk about certain things, but next few weeks, let's talk about this more in depth with Rob here as well. But yeah, coming up after this, if you've enjoyed this chat, we're going to put in the earlier podcast for the race review. So yeah, if you want to stick around and enjoy that, be my guest. But yeah, enjoy, guys. What a crazy afternoon. Hello, Rob. Welcome back to the Christ MotoGP podcast. And there's plenty to talk about after the weekend that we had in Mugello. The track action might not have delivered to recent standards of previous races, but there's plenty to talk about off track as well. Of course, joining me is Pete McLaren and Rob Jones. Pete, we had a very interesting weekend in Mugello. Ducati stamping their authority back on there, and more importantly, Pecco Bagnaia delivering for Ducati, winning both races this weekend.
Perfect weekend for Pecco, wasn't it? Yeah, led every lap, didn't he, of the sprint and the Grand Prix. So what the home fans wanted, and there was plenty of them there. So yeah, it was a great weekend for Ducati, the factory team, for Pecco. As we were saying, getting back on top, getting back in. I guess he was obviously never out of the title fight, but you know what I mean. He's now firmly on the heels of Martin once again. So yeah, it's exactly what Pecco needed. Two big results, perfect weekend, and yeah, just reminding everybody why he's the reigning double champion.
Well, Rob, your prediction was right. You finally got a Grand Prix winner in there, and yeah, Bagnaia, as Pete said, 18 points off Martin in the title fight. How big is that for him? We've had a break now before Assen, but of course a track that he loves as well. Pecco looks like the man, isn't he, to maybe win a third title in a row?
Yeah, and it was, don't forget this time last year where he started to put those results together sort of from Mugello onwards, and pretty much I think he won 4 Grand Prix in the space of just a few weeks. So, if you can build on that and put a similar streak together, I think that gap that Martin has could not only be completely lost, but go the other way. And I think, like Pete said, the perfect weekend to do it at home like that, but to dominate both races the way he did. He was unbeatable in the sprint, and then even with the 3-place grid penalty, that you thought maybe a little setback given who had qualified ahead of him, and it wasn't at all. After 2 corners he was leading, very aggressive but controlled, and it sort of looked like, Jordan, you said off air, every other rider was sort of cautious going through those corners, but Bagnaia knew how important it was for the front tyre, got to the lead, controlled the race, and just delivered another World Champions ride.
Yeah, it's 3 in a row for Pecco at Mugello, Pete, and it's kind of getting to, I don't want to say it, it's getting to Valentino Rossi territory now for Bagnaia at Mugello. Rossi had that great streak on the Honda and then the Yamaha where he would just keep winning every year. do you think Pecco's kind of grown this year? I kind of noticed the difference with him, with the crowd and everything. A lot more Bagnaia t-shirts in there, hats, flags. He really took on the responsibility this weekend of being the home rider, the world champion, didn't he, for his home crowd?
He did, John, and there's a lot of pressure there as well. And it was Pecco showing that he can handle that pressure and that expectation, wasn't it? Yet again, of being that guy, that focus of all the crowd, and that expectation of, look, all the Ducati bosses are there, everyone's expecting you to win, and you go and you deliver. And yeah, that'll be a massive boost of confidence for him at a time when everybody or a lot of people are talking about who his teammate is going to be and everything else. And yeah, it's a good response for Pecco, and we know he likes to do his talking on the racetrack, shall we say, and he certainly did that.
He was very, how could I say, he kept calling it a clown penalty, the one they got given on Friday because of the impeding, because of Alex Marquez and stuff. Rob, what do you think of just that, the way he's able to, his response to that was, yeah, it was a clown penalty, but then even in the sprint race after, there was boos from the crowd towards Marc Marquez, and he said after to GP1, he hates the booing that's shown towards Mark. It just shows you, Pecco's so, his mentality sometimes it changes, and he says some great things, and he just changes. He becomes this real. He's a real character in MotoGP, isn't he? He can really say how he feels sometimes, and I think more he does that, the more he's just going to get more supporters, I think.
Yeah, I think just like we've seen with Marc Marquez this year, for the way he sort of adapted to Gresini and been a lot more joyful than in previous years, and that's, I think the public have become attached to that a bit. I think Pecco, in a different style, has that sort of feel, especially, obviously, it helps being in front of his home crowd.
Yeah.
But you saw on Friday, he was very against the potential of getting that penalty, calling it ridiculous, a clown penalty. But it goes back to what we saw also in Catalonia on circuit, that he can have an incident or something that he maybe doesn't agree with, and then put it out the back of his mind. And like Pete said, we've seen Bagnaia in previous years crash from the lead in races or maybe feel the pressure, but that seems to be like he's turning that around and he's absorbing the pressure in a better way. And I think that's what's also helping him be a lot more free with his comments, because he now believes in himself a lot more that he's going to turn situations around. So I think he's a character that MotoGP needs. I think he's great for Ducati. He's great for, given we've lost Valentino Rossi as an Italian in recent years, he is taking that sort of mantra now as being the lead Italian, but also having a similar personality and similar traits. And I think that is making the crowd sort of adore him quite a lot.
Yeah, I liked his helmet. It was pretty cool this weekend. The sort of the Kiss themed helmet, the rock and roll all night, and the celebration after with the guitar and stuff. Letting his personality get out there, Yeah, I like it. MotoGP needs that. We need more riders like it, showing their character. But the Grand Prix got even better for Pecco, and he didn't even know it. Pete, when he probably crossed the line, he looked behind, he thought Jorge Martin was going to be there. But Enea Bastianini playing the perfect teammate for him this weekend. And Enea having a difficult sprint with that collision with Martin at turn one ended his race. Bounces back on Sunday. He's in the full. Both Ducatis are in that beautiful blue livery, and they stick at 1-2 with Enea producing two great final last laps, to get Marc Marquez and to then gap him and then really eat into Jorge Martin and get him at the last corner. What was your thoughts on that brilliant overtake?
Yeah, it was a great comeback by Bastianini, really, wasn't it? All round, as we're saying, everyone's assuming he's out of a job, he's out of a seat. He's had all that sort of weighing him down of where you're going to go, are you going to go join Aprilia, whatever else. And so it was a good reminder from him, wasn't it, of just what he can do. And that charge at the end of the race, we know that's classic Bastianini when he's at his best, isn't it? On the used tyres, just getting more out of them, saving them, getting more end of race pace than anyone else. And who knows? I mean, if he'd done it a couple of laps earlier, or maybe he could have challenged Pecco. Who knows? But I'm sure he would have enjoyed, as you say, after that collision with Martin in the sprint, that no action taken on that one. But we know that I think Bastianini felt that could have been avoided, didn't he?
Yeah.
I'm sure he would have enjoyed just pickpocketing Martin at the final corner like that. And and certainly for Pecco as well. I mean, as you say, what a bonus to get some more points out of Martin's lead, and that's exactly what he needs from a teammate. And maybe that's another reminder to Ducati of the benefit of having a teammate who's able to support your world championship challenger, if you like, rather than having somebody who, if it's a Martin or a Marquez, who is going to be gunning for your other
Exactly.
teammate, isn't it? It shows how you can maximize your point score, get the 1-2 finishes, and that's. We saw how happy Ducati were, didn't we? The erupting in the pits, the Lenovo team, because it's exactly what they want—a 1-2 finish at home, as you say, in that special livery. That will be splashed all over the marketing and the adverts. So it's Bastianini's done himself a big boost with the team there. But where will he be next year? Let's see.
Exactly, and Rob, as Pete says, I think it was like they were celebrating Anea's overtake way more than Pecco's win. It was incredible seeing Davide Tardozzi. The man was going absolutely ballistic, and it was so funny to watch. And yeah, it just shows, like Pete said, if you had a Marc Marquez or a Jorge Martin in there, Rob, they're trying to take points off Pecco. But Anea, yeah, he's in the title fight. I think he's 57 points off, but he played the perfect teammate role yesterday to Pecco, and they embraced each other in Parc Ferme. It just makes you think, as Pete says, do they want to keep harmony like that, or do they want to have essentially the same team but kind of two teams in it? It's difficult, isn't it, to have that balance?
It is. I think obviously it's interesting because at the end of 22, the way Bagnaia and Bastianini raced each other, it didn't sort of lend itself to making you believe it was going to be as harmonious as it is, and for them to have this sort of relaxed relationship together in that team. But that's obviously the way it's gone, and I think Bastianini struggling so much last year, and obviously the injury at the first round, probably just allowed the partnership to go that direction without them meaning it for it to go that way. I think the immediate change with someone like a Martin or a Marc coming in, obviously different nationality, but two riders for different reasons who are obsessed with winning. Marc has done it his whole career, and he is at that point where money is not important anymore. It's having fun, winning, and being fast again. And for Martin, it's all about status. It's being in that factory team. And then I don't think it'll be enough for either of those two to be in the factory team and to say, right, we've got to the head of Ducati and we can be happy with that. Because then it switches again to that whole objective of, right, we've made it now, but now almost the objective resets and we've got to go and beat Bagnaia. That has to be cement ourselves as now the number one. So for us watching, it's great. And I think whoever they put between those two on that bike, it's going to be great. But you could see it from Ducati if they pulled the surprise of all surprises and go with Bastianini to stay. It wouldn't be the wildest thing, but I think because of the rumours that have come out of Martin sort of being the favourite now, discussions being had, which he admitted to, you sort of know the way Marc's been talking that there's at least been conversations. And Bastianini, even in the press conference yesterday, seemed a little bit down when he got asked about his future. You can almost sense he knows he's not staying. So I think for Ducati it would be a good decision. And Bastianini proved again that if he could just sort out his consistency and his race pace early on, a couple more laps, and he probably would have won that race. Because even with overtaking Martin on the final lap, I think he started the final lap 1.5 seconds behind Bagnaia and then ended at 7/10 with the overtake. So, we don't know what was possible, but I think for Ducati, they are going to go in a different direction. And for us, it's going to be great.
Yeah, 46.2, I think he done on the last lap, so it was something just ridiculous from Bagnaia, just the way I think when you watch the replays, Jorge Martin just kind of looks surprised when he just sees Bagnaia just glued to the inside of the corner. The bike doesn't move, it's just like it's almost stuck to the ground and he's just going round. It's such a great overtake, and one that's rare to pull off at Mugello, so I'll say for maybe overtake of the season so far, Bagnaia Bastianini gets it. And as you say, his future, we have the Aprilia link. I even heard someone say on the Dorna broadcast that KTM apparently could be an option for Bagnaia. Who knows there? So Bagnaia has a good future ahead. Might stay with Ducati still, I think. Could it be a long shot in the factory team? Maybe Pramac could be his spot if they go with Ducati. We'll come on to that at the end of this podcast because it was a complete, absolute mess with the comments made on Friday and who to believe and what not to believe and stuff. But yeah, a fantastic performance from Bagnaia Bastianini. Jorge Martin, as we said, in third place. A very underwhelming weekend, I think, Pete, from him. Crashing out of the sprint. And yeah, he did get a pole position, but he's losing points, isn't he? And it's like little things. His first time he hasn't finished a sprint as well. But yeah, he did recover and finished on the podium. But he was annoyed yesterday that he finished in third, wasn't he?
Yeah. I mean, nobody likes to be overtaken at the last corner for sure, do they? And yeah, as you say, both races he had sort of setbacks with obviously the crash in the sprint. He wasn't comfortable with the front of the bike, was he? Even though he got that pole position, but I think he went into the race knowing he didn't really have the pace of the Pecco, Bastianini, Marquez. But not having the pace is one thing, crashing out and getting 0 points is another, and that's not what he needed. So he came back from that. He salvaged, as you say, third place in the end. Looked like it might be second. As he said, he won't make that mistake again. So yeah, he'll run a bit of a tight line there. But I mean, he was, he's trying to look for the positives. I think they changed the setup. They moved some more weight to the back of the bike to try and help with the front, and he felt he was more competitive in the race. But just the tire pressure thing, he couldn't attack Pecco. He couldn't overtake or even try, really, could he? Which was a shame for all of us watching. We would have loved to see more battles at the front. So he put that down to the tire pressure a little bit. So yeah, let's see. I mean, it's you can't have great weekends every weekend. He was saying he's more competitive than he's been previously at Mugello. Yeah. So important for him now, though, because the pressure's on in the championship now with the point situation that he fights back at Assen. So yeah, it's off track. On the other hand, I think as you were alluding to there, it sounds like things are moving in his direction for the factory ride. Certainly looked a lot more happier on Thursday than Marquez did in that the event press conference, didn't he? So not all bad, but definitely. I mean, you would want to, if that is the seat that he's going to next year, it would have been the perfect place in front of all the Ducati bosses. Your dream result would be obviously to get a win and prove that you're the guy that should be on the bike. It didn't happen, but he got on the podium in the end, so it wasn't a disaster, but it certainly could have been better for him.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's what happens in title fights, isn't it, Rob? Where the leader gets tested over a couple of rounds. He had I wouldn't say it's been his best 2 rounds that he's had. It's probably been the most testing rounds from Catalunya to Mugello. He didn't finish inside the podium on the sprint at Catalunya. He did have a good Grand Prix then, finished second. But then it's kind of the similar story. He crashed out of the sprint, and you could see that he was being pressed when he tried to catch Marc in the sprint. He just didn't really have anything, and then makes the mistake. How do you think he's going to prepare now? He has a big break between the next round. Is that a good thing for him, or do you think he would just want to race straight away just to try and maybe get some doubts that he has? He's going to be tested here, isn't he? Because Pecco is in such great form at the minute.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the break will actually be a good time for him, and I think it's Bagnaia who would have maybe wanted the next race, and he's obviously got a good record in Aston to come straight away and to sort of apply more pressure. I think for Martin, that break could be good to just sit back, take a look at the season so far and assess how good he has been, because he's still been the best rider, not just because he's leading the World Championship. His consistency, I think it was only the US where he was off the podium in both races. So he's been so strong. And I think for Martin, it's a case of this year, especially leading so much so early on, he's going to be able to take that experience, because last year he knew what it felt to be chasing in the title fight for much of the season. Now he's obviously been leading a large part of the early season. He's going to know sort of how to sort of go about the last few races, how both scenarios feel, leading against chasing, and I think that should help him. Is that going to be enough? Bagnaia gets stronger as the season goes on. Not to say Martin doesn't, but you have to think that Bagnaia is going to continue to perform like this and only get stronger. So for Martin, it's also a case of, on those bad weekends, to not see a 39-point lead go to 18. That's too much. It's just too much. And for Martin, who is the king of sprints, crashing out of the sprint, I think, will really hurt, because he knows even if he maybe can't beat Bagnaia on every Sunday, I can at least get him on the sprints. That's sort of his 12 points, 10 points. That's where he can make it work. And obviously, like you said, chasing Marc, who had more pace than him, on a weekend where, like you said, he started Thursday in a very good mood in the press conference, but then Marc put that behind him, showed on Friday and on the Saturday, maybe you have made the wrong call, at your home GP, I'm showing you my form. And then for Martin, made that mistake. He did respond well yesterday, but again, we saw it in Qatar, where Bagnaia went from second row to lead and knew that it was a front tyre pressure race, and Martin wasn't aggressive enough. If he had been, maybe he could have stayed in front yesterday. But just small things like that he's going to have to get on top of to beat Bagnaia, who seems to be a bit more switched on in terms of just strategizing the races as well.
Yeah, it's really noticeable actually because, like I said to you, Bagnaia made the perfect start, was aggressive. It was very, like you say, Rob, good point. It was actually very much like Qatar, where he got through the first corner three essentially.
Like half a lap, wasn't it?
Exactly, it was pretty much like that, and he done the same to Martin yesterday. But Martin, to his credit, I think maybe 5 laps to go, he got the gap down to maybe 3 tenths, and he was really pressing him. But I think Bagnaia kind of needed that wake up just to kind of then respond, and he did respond. So it looks like Pecco had, just like you say, a bit more than what Martin had. Coming on to Marc Marquez, who I can't believe I'm actually saying this. I'm a wee bit disappointed yesterday from his performance in the Grand Prix because it looked so good from the sprint. You know, Pete, he had such a great set of pace, like you say, for the shorter race, and he was very confident. I got the sense after that he thought, yeah, I can actually give Pecco a run for his money, but it didn't really materialize. You know, he just kind of maybe overcooked it a little bit with his tires, and when he got past Bastianini for third, got passed again. A difficult race for Marc, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think we all thought that he would be able to take the fight to the factory guys, wasn't it? But yeah, it didn't happen. The 93 winning the 93rd Ducati race, that run of of numbers, it came to an end. And you know, but I suppose on the other side, well, when was his last time he was off the podium? Was Cota maybe? So it's been a while, hasn't it? So yeah, I mean, on the other side, we did see that he had his advantage over the other GP23s. Sort of, he regained that advantage, didn't he? We've seen the BR46s. Bezzecchi, Di Gianantonio, even Aleix had sort of chipped away and been closer than him, even ahead of him in some sessions in the previous rounds. Well, this time he was sort of standing alone, wasn't he, in terms of the GP23s? And for the first time, he made that clear, didn't he, in terms of saying fighting with the 2024 bikes. And that's interesting that he's avoided doing that so far. We know that's kind of the approach that they need to play, that say of the title top three. If you're Martin, you say, well, I'm a satellite rider. Hey, I shouldn't be fighting for the world championship. If you're Marc, you say, well, I'm on a year-old bike. You know, that's their sort of angle, isn't it, to kind of reduce the pressure in these kind of situations, if you like. And certainly, yeah, Marc just highlighting that, you know, I'm fighting these guys on the year-old bike. Just sort of remember that. So yeah, just sending a little bit of a message there. And we sort of, you know, he's got his 3 options, as he keeps saying, without wanting to actually say what those options are. The 2 Ducati ones are obviously stay at Gresini and or go to the factory team, and we assume the third is KTM.
Yeah, I think with his comments, you know, he was kind of just making it clear that, yeah, the GP23 is a rocket, but that 24 is an even bigger rocket. And you could see it actually when you watch the onboards. You know, Bastianini out of that last corner, Rob, you could just see the acceleration was a bit more for the 24 compared to the 23. But Marc kind of had, I don't think they said it's an issue, but you noticed on that last corner when he dropped the ride height, the puffs of smoke coming from the rear tire because of the compression. Maybe that cost him something, but they were quick to say it wasn't really an issue. But you can see, can't you, Rob, that maybe he's not getting frustrated so much, but he's just like, if I had a little bit more, I could just be fighting with him or even beating them, couldn't he?
Yeah, and I think it's because a few rounds ago he sort of hinted at that adaptation process being completed now. I think Marc was then hoping for maybe an immediate win. You know, Jerez was probably the race where he could have done it. You know, obviously he was battling with Bagnaia. If he'd made that first overtake stick, he probably would have gone on to win that race. I think for Marc, it's a case of, especially this part of the season where the crunch talks are being had, and it seems like Martin's going to get that seat. Marc's maybe believing that if he'd, you know, checked off a win already, that could have played a major role. And the fact that he is not struggling against the GP24s, but I think to your point, this weekend for me more than any other weekend was the most noticeable of the GP24 taking that step. You know, corner exit onto that the front straight. Bastianini was just powering away in those first few meters. Obviously, that was the first same meters where Marc was having that squatting on the back of the bike, and then the tire obviously puffing smoke. You know, he said that he didn't think it hurt his chances or played a role. But I think, you know, that And it's difficult because the GP24 is only going to get stronger, as they develop it. And obviously the GP23s are limited with what they're really able to do. So I think for Marc, it's more about finding like a better balance or adjusting the setup. Whereas for the GP24, it's actually about extracting, more power from the engine or the aero and finding more pace that way, which is always going to be bigger than what the GP23s can extract from their bike. So I think he will win a race. The GP23s are going to be competitive and there will be wins for them. But, I think the GP24 is just going to stretch its legs going throughout the rest of the season. And for Marc, it's just a case of maybe picking certain tracks where he can do the double or at least a Grand Prix win.
Exactly. I think this year is definitely noticeable that last year the 22 and the 23 there maybe wasn't a bigger gap between them because we've seen Bezzecchi dominate certain races, but this year that 24 has made such a big step compared to the even great 2023 bike, and it's just Marc probably looks at it and goes, I just wish I had one. That was just it. But he knows what he signed up to, and like you say, Rob, he will then target Sachsenring, Aragon, circuits like that where he is so strong, and the win will come, but I don't know where it's going to be in the next few rounds. We'll just have to wait and see. But speaking of someone who is confirmed for 2025 in a factory team, it's the biggest shock of all time. Pedro Acosta on the factory Red Bull KTM, confirmed on Saturday, I believe, wasn't it? Yeah, Pete. What a surprise that is. He's got the official bike. Yeah, it was always going to happen, wasn't it?
That's right. That's the move that we've been expecting really since since his first race, and he was up the front, wasn't he, straight away? It just seemed a matter of time before he was moved to let's say the official team. I know that KTM, Pura Mobility, they like to say they've got two factory teams, don't they?
Yeah.
But the KTM team, that's the original factory team, if you like, and he'll be going there. We don't know exactly how long. Multi-year deal is all it was phrased at. We didn't get a precise number of years for how long the deal is for, but I would think massive relief for KTM. I'm sure other manufacturers would have been just making polite inquiries about Acosta's contract situation. They'd have been crazy not to, wouldn't they? So to get the signature on the paper and to get the guy who, as they called, I think, a generational star, isn't he? To get him secured for the next few years, as we say, and presumably he's alongside Brad Binder at the factory team, and then there's the Tech Trois seats. But as you've been saying, there's a lot of riders linked with riding for KTM, even though Acosta's done this deal, and Acosta's showing, isn't he? He's showing that you can be a gas Tech Trois rider and you can perform better than the factory team. So I think that's opening a lot of eyes as far as people looking at the gas bikes next year, isn't it? And maybe why potentially Marquez, potentially Bastianini, these other rumours, and maybe people are saying, well, look what Pedro Acosta's doing on that bike. KTM really do support that team as well as the factory team. He's showing what you can do as, let's say, the second of the KTM teams, and that you can beat the first. I mean, he's still the top KTM rider in the World Championship, isn't he, at the moment? And clearly best of the rest this weekend, wasn't he? A bit of a lonely position. Yeah. Wasn't he, in between the Ducatis and everyone else? But that was, your first job is to beat everyone else on the same bike, and he did that this weekend, didn't he?
He did, yeah. It was a good starter, and it was after all the Q2 positions, so every single KTM was in Q1, and he was the only one in there in Q2. It just shows, and he like you say, podium in the sprint, and he was in 5th place in the Grand Prix. He was 7.5 off the lead. It was just a really good weekend for him. Not maybe he wanted more in the Grand Prix, but you could just see, Rob, couldn't you? The Ducatis were just a different level, really. But let me just look. So he was 7.5 off the lead. The next KTM was 15 seconds, so he was half of that again ahead of the next KTM. Just shows you, doesn't it, that they've made the right choice, really, in putting him in there in the factory team for next year.
Yeah, it was an absolute no-brainer. Like you said, the biggest shock in MotoGP this season. But it's one of those moves where, like Pete said, from round one, you could see the talent. And KTM, it would have been the worst mistake they could have ever made if they'd let him slip away in some kind of way. So for them to secure him, put him on the factory bike, it's sad for Jack Miller. I think we all like Jack Miller. But the results are just not there. They're just not there to justify anything other than Pedro Acosta replacing him. You know, and for Acosta, like you said, to be half of that margin ahead of the next KTM, the only KTM in Q2, the only one sort of pestering the Ducatis for the first few laps, and at least trying to make a move on Marquez and on Bastianini and trying to spice up the race a bit. You know, his performances have been incredible all season. You know, he's sort of already shown that ability, a bit like Marc. You know, when he crashes, he just puts it behind him, goes out for the next session, right at the top of the leaderboard again, and it's just he's relentless, he's consistent, and it's what KTM need. They need someone who's relentless, pushing the project on, showing that bike, whether it's the gas bike or the Red Bull Factory KTM bike, he's just putting it where it needs to be and showing that bike does have the potential that we keep thinking KTM has. It's a bit like Aprilia. We keep thinking the potential's in that bike, but why is it not being shown? But Acosta is showing that, and with experience, he's only going to get better. And I think, you know, like I said about Marc, I think a win is definitely coming his way this season. And if it doesn't, he's going to be a contender at least next season and for the following years. So I think for KTM, it's huge to secure Acosta in the factory team, and it now allows them to play around a bit with the gas team, because like you said, Jordan, that bike is now, because of Acosta, the appeal to join that team is huge as well. So KTM can probably pick from a big sort of bucket of riders.
Yeah, it reminds me, well, I know it's happened maybe 10 plus years now, but it's kind of KTM's Marc Marquez moment, with Honda signing Marc Marquez, having that big generational talent. They've made that step now, and they've got the talent they want to have for their project. So I just imagine it's a multi-year deal. It's probably to like 2048 or something. Who knows how long that contract's going to be? It'll just be until Pedro Acosta decides to retire. They'll just give him as much money as he wants.
A lifetime contract.
Lifetime deal, sign wherever you want. Just tell us whatever you need. Do you know what? You can have it. It's just, they've got their man, and it's a big step for KTM. And like you say, it benefits other riders looking at that seat he's currently on, because they'll see, that's just a factory bike. Why can't they go and do the same? Won't be as easy as that, of course, but yeah, their project is going in the right direction, and they've got the right man. I want to talk about stewards again. It's sometimes the incidents that you see over a weekend, they are different. The Martin Bagnaia one, or Bastianini one, sorry, I think it was 50-50, to be honest. It was, whatever way you look at it, you see that sort of incident a few times a year, and you're like, yeah, do you know what? Just let it settle. There's nothing you really do there. But the Oliveira Quartararo one, Pete, Quartararo felt that was a penalty, and even Miguel Oliveira, he was really sorry what happened, and I think he kind of expected a penalty really from it, but nothing came of it. How do we just get clarity over these things? It's just difficult to understand, isn't it?
It's the old consistency thing again, isn't it? It's that everyone will have a different opinion on things, but what the right riders want is to know what consistently the opinion of the stewards is. And the thing with Quartararo specifically, of course, he's been on the receiving end of penalties, hasn't he, in recent years? And he highlighted the incident with Aleix at Assen, I think it was 22, wasn't it, where he went for the pass, fell off, made contact with Aleix, who was forced off the track but didn't actually crash, and actually still had a great race and a great result. And Quartararo got a long lap penalty. He also had a long lap penalty for the incident with Oliveira to Jerez last year, wasn't it? And opening lap, opening few corners, sort of chaos, wasn't it? And he got penalised for it. And then on this occasion, it was a racing incident. So he was making clear, look, I'm not out to try and get anybody a penalty. That's not what it's about. But it was the consistency thing that he wasn't happy with. That, well, why was it? When I did it, it was the words. He called it playing with words, wasn't it? It was ambitious, at Assen exactly. When I did it. But now it's a racing incident, and as you say, Oliveira, he didn't try and cover up for it. He said, I made a mistake and tried to avoid the contact and tried to make the corner, and that's the way it goes. And his team boss, Wilco Zinenberg, was sort of backing him and saying, look, of course it's a shame it happened, but you've kind of got to try, especially in a sprint race with so limited laps, you've got to go for it. So, yeah, but it's the consistency thing. That's what is bothering the riders, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just difficult to understand what is a penalty, what isn't. And you know what? If this is it now, if it's just blanket, there's no penalties, so be it. Just come out and say it then. But I don't want to speak about it. It just annoys me, so it does. I just get really annoyed by it. It's just, we just get different answers each time. And like you say, Bagnaia had a go at it as well. He felt that it wasn't a penalty. Whatever way you look at it, if you think it was or not, we just aren't getting consistency, and that's the key here. Consistency needs to happen at the top level of Grand Prix motorcycle racing. End of. And yeah, that's the last thing I want to say about the stewards this week on the podcast. Now, Pete and Rob, I want your opinion on this. Aleix Espargaro retired, obviously, in Catalonia. Said that maybe he wasn't going to stay with Aprilia as a test rider, and from what reports came out from Motorsport in Spain and Autosport, it looks like he's going to be a Honda test rider in 2025. Rob, what's your thoughts on that? Do you think that's it's a great move for Honda, I think, but that's a big challenge for Aleix going onto that machine, isn't it?
Yeah, you took the words out of my mouth. It's a huge win for Honda. To get someone of Aleix Espargaro's talents and experience more than anything. He's ridden a lot of bikes. He's taken a lot of projects forward. We've seen what he's done with Aprilia more than anything. He's taken them from really struggling at the back end of the MotoGP grid to being race winners and consistently at the front. So I think for Honda, who have now fallen from that position of being at the top to at the back, it's something that Espargaro has experience with. He's clearly really experienced. He just showed again in Catalonia that although he's announced this retirement, he's still got the ability to win races, even though it was a sprint. So I think for Honda, it's a huge win. Stefan Bradl is a very, very good test rider. I don't know if that means any change for Bradl, whether it's going to be less wildcards or if he's going to be replaced entirely from the role. But to have, Aleix Espargaro as a test rider, I think for any manufacturer would be a very, very strong move. And for Honda, it's needed. Honda, again, this weekend, absolutely nowhere. They're from what they were a few seasons ago, I think we're really seeing that impact of what Marc Marquez was able to achieve on that bike and maybe how bad that bike was even when he was winning, because the direction, Alberto Puig talked about it on the broadcast yesterday, they're basically throwing the kitchen sink at the bike and it's just not getting better in any way. So I think to have someone come in with a different mindset, different opinions, is going to work wonders for Honda. A bit of a surprise that Espargaro is going to, has seen that project and wants to take it on. But I guess, the fact that he won't be racing anymore and it's probably a good payday might help.
Exactly. And Pete, what are your thoughts on it? It's not officially confirmed, but what it looks like, it is going to happen. It's a big challenge for Aleix, isn't it? He's done it with Suzuki. He's done it with Aprilia in the factory side. Of course, he's done all those CRT days where he was just developing those bikes. So he is the man really for it, isn't he?
He is, experience-wise and everything else. Yeah, we were all a bit surprised, weren't we, when he said it wasn't going to be Aprilia that he'd be doing this test riding for. We all, he kind of made clear that was a transition he'd be looking to make. If he retired, he'd retire, go into test riding. So he announced his retirement, and then we all assumed, right, test riding with Aprilia. And he made clear, no, probably not. Now, the Repsol Honda thing, it kind of makes sense, because there were some rumours that there was some contact between Repsol Honda and Aleix last year.
That's right.
After Marc left. So this maybe follows on from that. Maybe that contact, it was misinterpreted as a race ride, whereas perhaps, the feelers were being put out even then about maybe a test riding deal in future. Exactly what, how the test team will be reorganised. Aleix has sort of said that he's looking at what Pedrosa does as the ideal situation and talking about maybe one wild card, I think he said. So it seems he's not looking at doing, let's say, 6 wild cards. So maybe coming in alongside Bradl in the way that Pedrosa's come in alongside other test riders. They've got Pole there, haven't they? And they had Mika Kallio before and everything else at KTM. Maybe that's what he's looking at. So maybe they're looking at keeping Bradl on and really just boosting their test team for the reasons that you guys have mentioned, that they need to make up a lot of ground. And Aleix, he's a straight talking guy as well. It's a bit like with Cal at Yamaha. If he doesn't like something, he's going to say it. And that sounds obvious, but there's some riders who, when you've got all the pressure of all the engineers around you and they're going, well, what do you think of this new part? There can be quite a lot of pressure to say, oh, well, yeah, it's okay. Or maybe it can be, but guys like Aleix, guys like Cal, they will call a spade, and the engineers are left in no doubt as to what they think about it. And you need people like that when it comes to development of the bike. You need people to give clear answers about what's working and what isn't. Otherwise, you can waste a load of time. So, yeah, Aleix, as you guys have mentioned, you said it. All of the experience that he's gathered, developing the bikes, the Aprilia obviously is the example, but the Suzuki before, and making the best of the CRTs. He's got the experience, he's got the speed still, we know, and it'll be good for Honda if it happens. I think Aleix is, well, he didn't deny it basically on Sunday.
Yeah.
I think he was asked after the race, and he said, I can't say anything." So I mean, that tells you all you need to know, because it's very easy to deny something if it's not true. The fact that he chose not to deny it tells you that it's probably happening.
It's a good move, I think, for Honda. Great to see, actually. They're going to need a lot more than just Aleix Espargaro, but it's a great starting point to get just someone who's going to tell you, like you say, Pete, this is right, this is wrong, and this is it. The project will go up, and hopefully, like you say, next year he can do great things with that bike. He can make it better because he has so much experience from Aprilia, like you say, and Suzuki and all the CRT stuff. So yeah, good move from Honda, but I don't want to start on them. We'll do it because we have a break now, because we're going to do a podcast probably in the next few weeks. We'll talk about Honda just specifically, if that's alright, guys. That'll be a really interesting topic to talk about. And just quickly, testing is currently happening as we're recording. I'm just looking at the timing. It's wet in Mugello, and there's nothing really going to happen there today, unfortunately. Brad Binder's currently top with a 47.6, so there was actually damp patches on the track this morning. It was kind of dry, and it just started to rain. Bit of a lost test, really, isn't it, Rob? Here, a lot of things were kind of hoping maybe we could get something before we go on a break, but this doesn't really look good, does it?
No, it sounded like Honda and Yamaha, had brought some parts, and especially since they've had recent tests that haven't gone the way they wanted because of the weather, this would have been fairly crucial for them. But again, it's just completely wet, and it's a bit of a lost day. I think it would have been interesting to see if the GP23s, if they could have done anything with their bikes and maybe Marc Grassini and tried to make another step. But obviously, I don't think Marc's even set a lap time at this point. So
no,
it's probably going to be a day to forget. And it was, I think, for a lot of teams, going to be a very crucial test. So disappointing for them.
Yeah, the only team probably really happy is the factory Ducati team. I imagine they're all hungover at the minute, so they'll all be so happy that the rain's there, because I can just see Bastianini hasn't settled up. Bagnaia, all the mechanics are probably still, they're probably feeling it this morning. So yeah, well deserved for Ducati. And the last question I want to ask, just a cliffhanger for the next podcast. If you had just an answer, you can take one Moto2 rider and put him in MotoGP next year. Who would it be? Pete, who would that rider be?
Well, I mean, Joe Roberts is jumping straight to the mind after that win on Sunday, I have to say. And obviously, let's face it, he's already been rumoured, hasn't he? But it sounded like it certainly wouldn't be an automatic promotion to Trackhouse. So he needs results, and that's what he got on Sunday. So yeah, I'll go Joe Roberts.
Rob, who's your Moto2 pick? You can't say Fermin Aldegar. I'm not letting you just, because that's just cheating. So it is.
Okay, so to be different, I'll try and be different. I would go Iogura. I like the way he's responded again this year, and I think obviously the easy link would be Taka Nakagami potentially losing a Honda seat, and if they wanted to have another Japanese rider. I like the way Ogura's adapted this season on that Boscoscuro, so potential there.
The question is, would Iogura want to ride the Honda? That's the debate, isn't it? My rider, I'm just going to be different. I'm going to pick Sergio Garcia. Do you know why? I just think somehow there's a second Tech 3 seat, and I think maybe a Gas, his stature, he kind of reminds me of his height and stuff with Danny Pedrosa. He's quite small, but he really makes the bike work for his style, and of course he's had a great season so far, so I could see maybe him in MotoGP somehow. He wouldn't cost as much, but there's a lot of talent there, so yeah, we'll discuss that on our next podcast. I want to talk about Moto2 more in depth, and of course Moto3. And like I said, we've got a bit of a break now until, well, it's the last week of June really for Assen. So we'll have a Honda episode. We'll talk about the Japanese bikes. Any questions you have in the podcast, who knows, we might get a guest on as well, just to talk about everything MotoGP. But moving away from MotoGP, I want to say the last message. Congratulations to Michael Dunlop for equaling Joey Dunlop's record of 26 wins at the Isle of Man TT. This is recorded on the Monday, and unfortunately yesterday Michael on the Sunday was going to make it 27, but lost his advantage in the race due to visor malfunction on the RI and the pit stop. But he'll have plenty of chances this week to break the record. But yeah, that's all from me. Anything you guys want to add before we go?
No, as you say, the testing is the big disappointment, isn't it? The weather, because it sounds like there was new engines for Yamaha and for Honda that were going to be tested. So unfortunately, they're not going to get the chance. But certainly Yamaha have got another private test that they booked because of Kazakhstan being cancelled. I think they're going to Valencia, so all that testing will presumably now shift over to there in 10 days time, and maybe Honda and the others will do the same. But for the official, this is an official test, isn't it? That's why it's important, because for the guys without concessions, it was one of the last chances to get on track. I mean, when's the next one? Misano, I think, September. Yeah, so big break now before the rest of the field will get any chance to test outside of a Grand Prix weekend. So bad news for them, the weather today.
Yeah, not much you can do with the weather, Rob. Anything you want to add to the weekend's action?
Think, obviously, we sort of expected maybe some decisions to be made around this time, the Mugello weekend. So I think this time away, hopefully, the next 2-3 weeks, there could be some interesting developments on the rider market. I think that's what we'll all be looking out for, and because Ducati are that sort of first domino to fall, and I think once they've sort of made decisions, which we know are going to be coming soon, I think it's just going to help shape the rest of the grid. So hopefully there'll be some announcements for people to see, and some riders securing their futures.
Exactly, and we'll have it all covered on Christ.net, on our website, on social media, YouTube channel, you name it, we'll have it covered. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to give us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to. Really helps us out. If you're on YouTube, comment below on who you'd take up from Moto 2, and that will really lead on to next week's podcast. Like the video, subscribe on our YouTube channel, and we will see you next time. Take care.